you, Paolo from Bergamo. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Professor Gasuri, for giving me this opportunity to share with you some thoughts, some feeling, and maybe some useful experience. I would like to start from the beginning of the history and go back to the 21st of February when all the history started, at least in Lombardy. At that time, we were just working as a regular day in the hospital, and we heard that in Codogno, which is a small city 1 hour from Bergamo, there was admitted the first case with COVID-19. And at the same day, we heard that some other patients were admitted in our hospital. That weekend, I was enjoying a walk in the old city, and you can see here how many happy people going around and for a walk in this square. 1 week later, this was the situation. We started to hear sirens of ambulance coming to the hospital, and we started to see the fear and the concern in the eyes of our colleagues, and we suddenly understood that something unusual but very scary was going on. The following night, I started to have fever and cough, and I started my quarantine at home, 1 month of isolation, and that just ended 4 days ago after 4 positive tests. Probably this picture has done the round of the world. There is a very scary picture showing a long queue of trucks bringing the bodies of dead people from Bergamo to the crematoria. And just to give some numbers, Bergamo was particularly hit by this virus, and 1 in 4 of the total deaths in Italy are from Bergamo. And probably we are highly underestimating this figure because a lot of elderly people died at home without any test. And this means that probably an entire generation has been completely decimated. So I in those days, I started to think about colleagues that I used to work with, that I learned that were in the ICU in poor condition, intubated. I was aware that some of our colleagues that just retired were died. And when I started to recover and the physical discomfort settled, another kind of suffering came up, which was related to the forced isolation, the endless feeling of impending catastrophe, and that we were listening from the TV news, and the constant concern about relatives and friends. At the same time, I start to feel very empathic with our adult congenital heart patient, and I started to think that they probably were very scared in listening to the expert on the TV that were stating that because of their condition that we were likely to die if they would have caught the virus. So I started to call some of these patients, and suddenly I realized that there was plenty of opportunity for me to be useful just by advising them and listening to them. And I also realized that other colleagues and friends like Massimo were doing almost the same things in different ways for their patients. So we talk each other, we start to contemplate that probably this could be a unique chance not only for help our patient, but only to generate important data. So we agreed on a common protocol to follow up this patient by phone and to collect systematically the data. This what I'm showing here is the based on the data from Bergamo only, but we are going to merge the 2 databases These are almost 500 patients from our outpatient clinic. And I think that we will end up with more than 700 patients. As you can see here, most of patients that we follow, of course, come from Lombardy, and most of them specifically from Bergamo, which is the hot area. This is my protocol, our protocol to interview the patient. I will not go into much detail, but just to want to underline a few concepts. We try to minimize the clinical exposure of patients to the hospital. At the same time, we try to maintain a high level of medical and psychological support for our patient and their family by phone. I also gave patient a number that could use in case to notify any changes in symptoms. So now we also have some kind of follow-up for this patient. This is our population, as I said, around 500 patients. Of course, we prioritize the more complex patient, and probably you can see on the right hand, the figure is covered by the screen, but as I said, probably we are underestimating the number of patients because we could test only 3 patients from our cohort, but 90 patients altogether, which means 20% of patients had specific symptoms, which means a combination of fever, cough, loss of smell and taste. This is just to show you how these numbers are divided in different categories, and again, there are a lot of patients symptomatic within the complex patient, and in particular with palliative patient, univentricular patient. What happened about what we did was to, as I said, to try to keep all these patients at home. What we did is based basically on local protocol, hospital protocol, institutional protocol. This is not guidance, it's just what we are doing. So the priority was to keep liaison with the general practitioner to monitor symptoms and saturation whenever was possible, to convert all the device control with remote device monitoring, and so on. In terms of medication, there is now in place, at least locally here in Lombardy, in our hospital, the protocol to start hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin in this patient, and the low molecular weight heparin. All these patients were kept at home, so 88, the vast majority of these patients were kept at home, 88 patients out of 90. Only 2 patients were hospitalized. And I have to say that one patient had only very mild symptoms, and the other one was hospitalized, but again is disturbing. I just spend the remaining few minutes to present 3 emblematic patients that probably can give us some insight, some information. Complex patient, artery switch, so quite old patient compared to our core, because of course patient who undergone artery switch a little bit older. And this is a patient that we follow. We just underline in the demographic and the BMI, which is normal. So the patient was pretty fit. And he assessed the need for atrial fibrillation. And that figure that you can see in the graph is are the numbers of patients that were growing during that period because of the spread of the virus. So I assessed initially to the hospital, which in the area that was the first lockdown area in Lombardy. After 1 week, he started to have back pain, very specific symptoms, no fever, no other symptoms. We went again to the same hospital, they did the CT, and they found this interstitial pneumonia. At that time, there were almost more than 15,000 patients infected, or at least notified. He was hospitalized. He didn't need any ventilation, any medication, and he was successfully discharged after 1 week. The second patient is the same anatomy, but completely different presentation. So he is an obese patient with comorbidities, diabetes, renal failure, etc. And all the history started again with dyspnea, worsening cough. He was, in this case, admitted with pneumonia. And we started our usual protocol, initially with hydroxychloroquine, and then we started the trial of high dose steroids. He was in very poor condition, not intubated, but on CPAP for many days, but fortunately we could win this patient and to taper the steroids, and is ready to be discharged. And these are so the two ends of presentation. This is an intermediate patient, same anatomy again. He came, I called him, he reported fever and cough. I kept him at home, but after 1 week, coughing was worsening, so I decided to bring him quickly to the hospital for a chest X-ray and hemodynamic analysis. The saturation was okay, the chest X-ray was okay, so we discharged him. I put together this patient because I think that they are very emblematic, because they are all complex patients around the same range of age, all male patients. What matters here seems to be the usual risk factor that are recognized in the general population, rather than the specific physiology, the specific anatomy. In particular, obese patients with comorbidities, poor compliance, bad lifestyle, and so on. So if we can just summarize some lessons that I had from this initial analysis, and probably when we put together the data that kindly Massimo gave me, we had more information, but his data, I think, are in the same line. They are confirming this. So probably the anatomy doesn't matter that much, the complexity doesn't matter that much. Probably is what matters is the lifestyle education, the social distancing, so the usual advice that we give to the general population. I think that this is also a good chance to learn. For me, was a great occasion, because I start saying that at the beginning of the history, we felt something unknown and very scary was going on. Now I definitely, that are in the middle of the battle, I definitely know that all this has changed it and will change my life forever. Something very dangerous, invisible, washed out my certitude and forced me to change my plan, to postpone my wedding and so on. But at the same time, it was a unique chance to be helpful for the patient. Last but not least, I would like to show this image. This is a picture which is in front of our hospital, and I will just take a few seconds for a few thought about all the doctors and nurses that lost their life during their work because of this pandemic in Italy. Thank you very much.
Paolo, thank you so much for this. This is not just the uniqueness of the data and how they are helpful to the patients and trust, but also your personal perspective to this. And what a better example of through difficulty to do some good. So really appreciate that. Maybe before we go to Massimo, because we are learning from you here, and that's what we are, hoping to do. So then we can help patients here and elsewhere in the world. But maybe one or two clarification questions, and then we'll go to Massimo for me and for our audience, Paolo. Within this group of 90 patients that you had the clinical diagnosis of COVID-19, were there any patients with the Fontan circulation?
There were, for my data, there are 2 patients with Fontan circulation that had definitely symptoms. One patient was after conversion, so quite complex patient. He started to have very typical symptoms, some shortness of breath as well. It was an anticoagulated patient, was taking anticoagulants, so there was the Another issue was to adjust the INR in this situation. I was able to keep this patient at home and also another patient. So for the two Fontan patient didn't need any admission. And so far, this is now 1 month follow-up. They are doing well.
This is obviously the numbers are a little small, but something very positive for us and our audience. And the second question before we go to Massimo, clarification question. Paolo, I presume that you know that none of your patients in your books died through the pandemic. Is that correct? You have access. You know that there was no death out of your population.
No. So far, there is no death. Yes.
No death. Thank you so much, Paolo. Really appreciate it.